I grew up in Orlando. I was a city boy. I didn't know what citrus was about till I got into school. You were just the opposite, right? You
The
grew up in
opposite.
the industry. And I like to talk about what it was like growing up in the citrus industry. So tell me a little bit about your history. Did you ride next to your dad in the pickup truck? Did you get out in the grove? So tell us a little bit about your history in citrus.
So I was born in Bartow. I grew up in Alturas. Mom and Daddy had met in first and second grade in a one-room schoolhouse in Alturas. And that's where, of course, they both lived until they passed away. My earliest memory of citrus, I think about what my earliest memory is, and I don't know which one came first. I have a very clear memory about the 1962 freeze. And we had overhead irrigation. Everybody ran overhead irrigation during that freeze, and the trees were just, it was a winter wonderland, right? Unbeknownst at that juncture of what the difficulty was.
Literally tons of ice.
Tons of ice. So I have a memory of Daddy coming to the house and telling Mama to put us in the car, and me and my brother Scott and Christy Voigt, a neighbor down the street, a rural street, we went to a grove around the corner, and I would not get out. I was afraid of it, I guess. And so my mother said, I'm not letting this moment happen without it being recorded. And she takes me, and I remember her, sticking me in that tree and taking my photograph, and I think I'm crying my eyes out. Nancy Gurnett Hardy, I don't know where that photograph is, but Nancy Gurnett Hardy and I used to laugh about that picture. I had it when I worked at Florida Citrus Mutual. I confused that with my earliest memory of my father. And of course, the 62 freeze had to be the earliest because Daddy didn't work for Kraft as a fruit buyer of Kraft Foods in Lakeland until the mid-60s. And so back in the day, we had a lot of muck fires. It was dry back then, and we would have muck fires, and there'd be smoke, and people couldn't go the roads. You couldn't go on the roads. And I am sitting in Jack Dollar's lap at our kitchen table, and he was a fruit buyer or worked at Kraft with Daddy, and there was other fruit buyers there. I didn't have an understanding of how beautiful my mother was at that juncture, and they were not there for my father.
So you grew up in citrus. Did the family have groves?
We did. We have I'm a third generation citrus grower. My mother's family, my mother's father's family came as the boll weevil. My mother's mother has been here in Florida forever. I mean, pre-Civil War, forever. So yes, we had groves, and so we grew up in our grove. The house was in front, the grove was in the back, and of course we also came through a time when we had nematodes, and we had the EDB, ethylene dibromide borders, the barriers, and we would get in a lot of trouble if we rode our horses or crossed those barriers with the Jeep. And so yes, and growing up like that was special.
I talk to people, and I get a lot of stories that they remember going out in the grove and having the packed lunch that Mom fixed and working with Dad and everything else. Were you and your dad close? Did you
Yes.
y'all worked in the grove together?
Yeah, we were very, very close. Of course, my brother was older than me, but we were, during those freezes, not so much the smudge pots. I never worked smudge pots, but I did go out when we changed over pipe irrigation. And it was a aluminum pipe that clipped and turned, and of course that was a lot of fun too. But it was a lot of work when you were running irrigation at night, and so we would go out and bring people supper. Bring them. We did a lot of fires in the grove and a pot of coffee and things like that. So that was really a good memory doing that. We also, we learned to drive everything extraordinarily early. I learned to drive stick in a 1942 Dodge Power Wagon we turned into a supply truck. And Daddy always made fun about when I learned to drive, I had to go beneath the steering wheel to get the clutch in to change the gears, and then I'd pop back up. And of course, we rode the Groves, and I also had a 1942 CJ2, and I could drive that after school just as long as I was going to hoe trees or get orange dogs off trees or whatever pretend work I really had on that. So, but my real work came with Mama, and we ran picking crews. In addition to, my mother worked at Alturas Packing Company. I grew up in that scale house. Daddy worked for Kraft Foods. Both of my grandparents, my grandfather, one harvested fruit for Pasco, the other one for Pasco, and then was a fruit buyer at Evans. So we were covering pretty much the whole spectrum, but I did payroll. And so we not only sold our fruit, but we bought and sold other people's fruit, and we did that harvesting. And so we had the picking payrolls came in on Wednesday night, and then you'd figure out your picking payroll, and then you'd manually type those checks. And so that's what Mama would figure, I would type, and we put payroll together because it would have to be sent out on Friday.
That's the picture that a lot of people don't understand. They think that citrus was a man's world. Mm-hmm. And citrus, a lot of the visible part of the citrus industry was a man's world. I mean, the guys got together and had lunch at the local restaurant, and they bought fruit and sold fertilizer, and they went to grove meetings and everything else. But what was going on while they were doing that was that someone was back home doing the work, making sure the invoices were lined up, they were paid, labor crews were paid, and all that, and the paperwork had to be done. And if it wasn't a team effort, it wasn't successful.
Yes, that's true. So my mother was also very productive, and she went to work when I went into first grade. She went to work at Alturas Packing Company in the scale house. And so scale houses, I love the logistics part of our industry. And back then, people don't remember this, we had those plastic label makers, and we put trailer numbers on magnets, and the magnets were on the board. And so a truck would weigh in, and of course this was these were Alturas Packing Company's trucks and trailers. So you knew what packing house or what processing plant the eliminations were going to. You also knew what trailers were out in the field. And so you did that all with magnets. And so there was the old joke about take it to the baby, that was Home Juice in Avon Park. Take it to the duck, that was Lake Wales. Take it to the blind pig, that was Procter & Gamble, a pig without an eye.
Wonderful. So you were inducted, or engrossed in the citrus industry. You went to Florida Southern?
I did. I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think I'm the first woman to have a degree in citrus from Florida Southern. And so this is where my divergent, so I was so fortunate to be at Florida Southern during the sweet spot. I went to the University of Florida I graduated from high school in '78, went to UF, and was in food and resource economics, little sister at AGR. And all the guys that were there, Marty McKenna, Dean Saunders, Keith Davis, Bill Braswell, Randy Hanna, just a ton of people that are still with us, and I know I've missed some of those guys that are still in our industry. Well, after 1 year, I transferred to Florida Southern, and I know there was a big argument between Tom Mack and Dr. Pravat about bringing me in the program, and because there weren't any women in the program. So Dr. Pravat was my hero. Tom Mack had actually taught my father also in high school. He was in Bartow. So I came into Florida Southern Citrus Program, and I was one of 72 and the only girl in 72 of those guys. So a lot of people often say, how do you know everyone? Well, I went to school with that group of guys at Florida, and then I came back to Florida Southern, and we just had a tremendous group of people. Peter McClure, Steve Farr, Ted Geltz, Ed Dupenthaler, Dave Matthews, they'll all shoot me for not remembering. Randy Sexton, Dan Ritchie. Now,
Wow.
Dan wasn't actually a citrus major.
No, Dan was the second baseman.
He was the RA for the Citrus House. I missed but we all sort of overlapped in there, but we all stayed close. And then of course Dr. Pravat, we went to field trips to People's Groves, and our first field trip that fall that I was at Florida Southern, Hurricane David had come up the East Coast, and I believe it was Barry and maybe Tom Taylor had planted the grove resets, and that hurricane had just laid those trees down, and we went and saw that. I also told people, don't believe it, that the first, I've been attending Citrus Commission meetings since 1978, and so that was the first Citrus Commission meeting that I went to, I think was 1978.
Well, so you saw the industry, and one thing, I was a Gainesville guy, and the difference, one of the big differences was that if you were at Southern, you were in the industry, and Dr. Pravat was really good at taking students out and interacting. We never did that in Gainesville.
Well, we made fun of you guys because y'all were fruit crops majors. You weren't citrus majors.
Well, and now they're just horticultural majors.
That's right.
It's gone and gone.
Well, I think that speaks a lot to Dr. Pravat and his idea that it was so much more than just learning how to grow an orange. If you could not assimilate into the business of the industry and know why we were doing it, not just what we were doing, but why we were doing it. So he really spent a lot of time encouraging us to be at the Florida Citrus Mutual meeting or be at the Citrus Commission meeting, and going to Lake Alfred to the experiment station.
Well, see, y'all started networking early on.
Yes, very early.
And you were visible. I think that's and that was wonderful to be able to see firsthand what was happening. So
the real politics of that, though, I think for me in the industry that was born early was being with people that bought and sold fruit. Intermediate handlers. I mean, I just think they're the unsung category of our industry, and there's a story that so there's a transition in this industry where fruit was bought by the box, and then it started to be bought by the pound solids, and a lot of the fruit buyers could not make that change in their mind. And so we tested fruit with hydrometers, even as kids. It was refractometers. And so my grandfather worked for Pasco, and Harry Reppard was, I think, his boss. I think that's right. I might be confused about that. But everybody down in Central Florida and in the state were really big in the Florida-Georgia game, and they used to take a train out of Tampa and go to Jacksonville on the game. And so it happened in the October time of the year, like it does. And so my grandfather, Joe Perdue, told the story that as everybody got on that train on Friday at noon and wouldn't be back until Sunday at noon, Harry Reppard gave him a price to buy fruit. And so he bought, I believe, 1 million boxes of fruit that weekend. And when Preacher Mitchell, L&M Fruit Company, got back, he was very unhappy with Harry Reppard and how that went down.
Well, that's interesting because I'm sure that that a lot of fruit was bought in places like Jack's Barbecue and on trains to the Georgia game and in hunting camps and things like that. And of course, back then, when you and I made a deal, we didn't have contracts and lawyers and everything else. I did an interview with Gilbert Bowen a number of years ago.
Yes.
And Gilbert said, yeah, heck, back then, he said, if I needed $1 million, I'd just call Pasco and talk to so-and-so. And the guy would say, you want to come pick up the check or you want me to mail it to you?
He'd call Francis Crowe. That's who he would call.
So you didn't need attorneys and all this. A man's word was all you needed. And so it was a different industry. Talked about independent, fruit buyers like Gilbert. I've been trying to tell the history, and it's my mission. I'm too old to solve problems now, so I'm just trying to preserve the history. And I have put some crate label signs in Lake County, and one of the signs is Piney Woods Bell. And Piney Woods Bell was Mr. E.B. Peters' packing house. And Mr. Peters moved from Macon, Georgia to Leesburg when he was 5 or 6 years old. Anyway, got in the citrus business. And when he was 16, he had a mule and a wagon. And he would go around to the little small growers in Leesburg and buy a few boxes. And then he would take all those to the packers and sell them. So Mr. Peter was a bird dog early on. If it wasn't for those people, those small growers wouldn't have a market for their fruit, and wouldn't they be able to get rid of it?
Well, and that's also why we have a lot of the regulation that we do. A lot of people, you know, you have to be licensed and bonded to buy and sell fruit. Now, the bond, we can argue that it was never enough to cover it, but it did keep people, you know, on the up and up. And you know, there's always people that are straight up, and we've always had some people on the skirting the edge of the law. And that's what we always said. We didn't just need a hall of fame in this industry. We might have needed a hall of infamy as well.
Probably so. And you know, growers were always advised, and they needed to know that if you're selling your crop, you know, you want to sell it to a licensed dealer, because otherwise you had no recourse at all. You were stuck there. All right, so you graduate from Southern, and as a pioneer and a trendsetter, and I'm sure a lot of other ladies have gone to Southern after you. But so where was your first job in the industry?
So finishing school, I had an opportunity to do an internship with Lawton Childs while I was in school. And I went to DC, went to work for him, and he offered me a full-time job. I had finished all of my citrus courses. I only had 12 hours of electives left, but we know that electives, 12 hours is a lot, right? But it was a great job, and I wanted to get my foot in the door. So I didn't realize at the time when I took the job and I finished my degree at night with the help of Dr. Pravat, that I had beat Dennis Ross out, who became a congressman for that job. And Dennis and I laugh about this all the time. As a result of that, Dennis went to law school, and then the person that replaced me in that job when I left was Dean Saunders. And so Bobby McCowan, I was working for Lawton Childs. I had come back to Lakeland after doing a stint in Washington, D.C. I was doing foreign affairs, immigration, and agriculture for him. And we had I believe it might have been EDB and fumigation at that juncture. I can't remember, but we were at a hearing, and I met Bobby McCowan. And Bobby offered me a job at Mutual in the Market News Bulletin. And I believe I was the first professional woman hired at Mutual other than secretarial staff. And so I worked for a bit under Roy Hunter and Bobby Griffin at the Market News Bulletin. So when we did the Market News Bulletin, we called twice a week all the packing houses and all the processors for the pricing, and it had to be published historically. I called 137 packing houses and 52 processing plants. That's what we had when I started that job.
And they would give you what the market price was for that week.
And so that's what you would get the spot market. So most of this next generation coming up now, they don't know a time when your fruit wasn't bought on contract. And contract was a rare thing. That's why we had our cooperatives, West Coast Growers, Florida Orange Marketers. Florida's Natural didn't even have a cooperative a marketing group at that time. And Adams Packing had a cooperative group at that time as well. But your fruit was a spot market. And so the reason that we published that bulletin was so that people knew where they could deliver their fruit to, or where the best price was. There was a contract price, but it was usually on Valencias, not Valencias, Valencias. And so that, and it was, farther out. And then Mutual, of course, most people don't understand that one of the premises for the formation of Florida Citrus Mutual was pricing. That the growers got together so that they could do that, and they got in trouble with the Capper-Volstead Act, was sued over it, lost the suit over the Market News Bulletin, and then the Market News Bulletin had to be reported 24 hours. It had to be in a historical, Mutuals mostly price reported historically. But today, I believe the Justice Department says it's not a 24-hour period to be considered historical, it's 15 minutes.
Oh. Well, good perspective. Yeah, Mutual's original intent, I think growers thought that Mutual could set the price, and they learned that that wasn't
Correct.
Mutual couldn't do that.
Wasn't their job.
But on the other hand, Mutual could provide them with, quote, historical information on pricing, and for many years, probably a larger percentage of the crop was sold in that manner rather than a contract. Of course, in my territory, up in Lake and Orange County, we were much stronger in co-ops than they were down here.
Sure.
Because a lot of smaller growers got together, so you had Golden Gem and Mount Dora growers and Plymouth and so forth, where they pooled their resources and their fruit was already marketed through the co-op.
Well, I want to speak to when I came to Florida Citrus Mutual. You know, there were women in the industry, but not women that were really in those places where certain processors, packing houses, and bird dogs sought influence. Right? There were people from Lake County in particular who were so welcoming to me and treated me with such respect and really helped me along. And that was Tom West and Duke Crittenden, Gene Langley. Those guys were so incredibly good to me. Phil Tope, Bob Tope, Gene Mooney, Elliot Seabrook. I mean, they were just they treated me as good as I could expect. And I did have other people that didn't treat me so openly.
Well, you know, people that are going to judge you based upon whether you're a male or a female, those are the kind of people you want to associate with. All those names that you mentioned, I know them, and they were treating you based on your performance and your capabilities, not where you came from or anything else. And, you know, I think Elliot Seabrook is still around, I see.
Yes.
You know, not...
Well, the other two that I need to mention is Phil Herndon. Phil Herndon was always in my court. He was really such a great guy to me.
Well, that's the great thing about this. There's so many fantastic people in the industry. I'm having fun meeting them all and learning stories that I didn't. I did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Tom Thayer. And
Oh, yes.
Tom's a fascinating story. You can go online, you can see the interview.
Well, and that's something, I mean, Tom, you know, my father started NewJet. Tom worked for Microjet. And Tom they were a South African-based company, and those jets were 25 cents a piece. They were very expensive. And my father ended up buying a plastic injections molding machine, and he was the first manufacturer of low-volume emitters in Florida. And then Tom had a falling out with Microjet, and he came to Daddy. Daddy had NewJet, Leland had NewJet, and he bought NewJet from us, and Daddy held the paper for 5 years for Tom to get his legs under and develop MaxiJet.
Fascinating stories. And then the story that Tom and Gilbert Bowen told me was that Tom was talking about going to the International Citrus Congress in South Africa. Mm-hmm. Didn't think he could go, and Gilbert Bowen said, "You're going to go," mm-hmm. and made sure that he went and brought back the idea.
Yep,
so,
of the low volume irrigation.
So those kind of stories, you know, just kind of ease on out of there. So you were at Mutual,
yes.
And you interacted with some really fascinating people there, you know.
I was there at the perfect time, and you know, I think that it was, you know, I knew people that were in the industry that, like I said, had only bought fruit in bulk or by the box, and then we transitioned, of course, into buying by the pound solids, and it was just it was a really incredible time. And because I was sitting in the lap at the kitchen table of those fruit buyers, you know, I had been doing it a long time. It's also probably what gave people a great deal of faith in me, that I understood where we'd been and where we were going. So after Mutual, I actually went to work in the family business for a bit of time to automate our business, because that's, you know, we went from Mom and I hammering out checks on an IBM typewriter to doing them by computer. And I'll never forget the first time we ran the W-2s. You know, the W-2s would take you weeks and weeks to do W-2s on picking crews, and literally we ran our W-2s in an hour that year, and we just kind of looked at each other and went, wow. But after that, I was also elected to Florida Citrus Mutual's board. Now, Dorothy Shipes had preceded me on that board, but I then again ended up being on that executive committee, and again, I credit Phil Herndon with a lot of that, and Bobby too, Bobby McCowan.
I did an interview with Bobby, and quite truthfully, when you were an extension agent, extension service and mutual weren't always the closest.
Copacetic.
Yeah, Bobby wanted to make sure that mutual was credited for a lot of things, and so anyway, but I went to Tallahassee and talked to Bobby for long time, and I left there just utterly blown away with the guy. Now, he was a micromanager, I know that. You had to have your own key to the bathroom, and he wanted to, but he had such perception, such knowledge of the industry. He knew all the little intricacies that were going on. I was just fascinated at that. Plus, he could probably work a politician and get things done as well as anybody. You had to have picked up some great, I mean, Bobby McCowan and Lawton Childs, you had some.
I did. I had some incredible mentors.
What mentors?
When I list, if I list who I've worked for, it is, it is an amazing thing. I think that most people don't credit Bobby McCowan with, and I always used to kid him about this. I said, you know, it's really terrible that probably the most significant work you did was in the first year you were at Mutual. And he had been working at the Florida Citrus Processors Association. He was the number 2 person under Warren Savant. And he was hired for the job at Florida Citrus Mutual. So he had a real understanding of the process side of the business. And I think that's also been my benefit too, is understanding the process side of the business. He got wind that Tropicana, Mr. Rossi, was going to bring in juice into bonded duty warehouses, transform concentrate into single strength, and circumvent paying the concentrate tax for import.
You know where Bobby got the inside information on that?
No.
He told me, he said, I was playing in a golf tournament and somebody from another processor slipped that out. Bobby said, as soon as I heard that, the warehouse, everything, he said, the clubs were in the cart and I was gone. And so,
Yep.
but if he hadn't had that background
Oh.
and didn't understand what was going on.
The impact of it.
Look at the impact it would have had.
No, incredible. I mean, incredible. But, you know, things happen for a reason. Timing and networking, all of that really matters. And then you know who you can trust and you can't. You know, Bobby was a great teacher, and he might have micromanaged, but it's awfully hard when you are looking at things at when you're at a 30,000 foot level, but you're dealing that against world players, and to come back to your boardroom, and Mutual had 21 board members at that time. That's a heck of a large board to have to work, and you had different levels of maturity on that board, and so it was a tough job. And yeah, you could love him or hate him, but for what he did for our industry, he should be recognized as he is in the Hall of Fame.
He is. I was just blown away. I overly impressed with, and he took over Mutual. They were in trouble. They were bankrupt almost.
Oh yeah.
And,
Tom Osborne, yes.
And
we'd gone through several different, I'm a staunch supporter of Florida Citrus Mutual, and I always like to remind people when they talk about it being a grower organization that the triangle, the base of that triangle are growers, but the two sides are packers and processors, because we can't exist without each other.
like, don't work together, we're going to all fall apart.
So after I left Mutual, I was working in the family business, and Bob Crawford was elected Commissioner of Agriculture. And I had a call from Jim Griffiths, and Jim was saying, I know you know Crawford really well because we were all from Alto Esparto. And he goes, I hear he is not going to be in Tallahassee. He's going to base himself out of Winter Haven. And I want to know if that's true or not. And so I said, okay. So I called Bob and I said, are you going to do that? He goes, no, I'm going to have an office in Winter Haven, but I'm going to be in Tallahassee. I said, okay. I said, well, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. He goes, well, a matter of fact, there is. He said the Division of Fruit and Vegetable inspection is in really tough shape, citrus inspection. And I need somebody to get in there and tell me how to fix the money. And so that was my first step into working for government at that juncture. And boy, did we do a lot and learn a lot. We right-sized that. It's some of the work I'm the most proud of. I had some great people that we worked with, and we right-sized that industry. We made citrus inspection, all of the inspection was paid by processed citrus, so we made every commodity that we inspected carry its own weight. We created a worksheet where we had revenue producing hours that determined the percentage of non-revenue producing hours to be divided, which is still in place today. But our biggest thing that we did was we took fresh fruit inspection, which required an inspector to be present, and we created, in conjunction with USDA, the Partners in Quality Audit-Based Inspection Program, which is the foundational inspection program for audit-based inspection in the world.
Now, it seems that, well, early on, if we were going to ensure that mature fruit, quote, was shipped, that there was an inspection thing. I guess in the mid-30s, the Department of Citrus came along and did that. And then I've heard the argument, well, today, why do we bother to do that? If a packer is going to send poor fruit, he won't keep a buyer, so he's got to be doing that. Do they still are packers still doing their own inspection, or do you?
Well, Partners in Quality is the primary way that fresh citrus in Florida is assured, consumers are assured that they are getting a mature piece of fruit that meets a specific grade. And so that is in place. We audit those. So what we do, and I knew this when we set the program up, that you spoke about labels. Well, brands and labels, you have an investment in that. That's your entire reputation in your business. And that carries more weight than a USDA grade A, right? Or first grade 1. So what we knew is that when a packing house because we dropped in unexpected for those audits, that they had a lot on the line if they were not doing what they said they would do. And it's just like anything when you're running an organization. It's not that anybody can make a bad decision. What determines your character is the decision that you make after that bad decision. And if you make a corrective action in audit-based inspection, you were great. If you didn't, you weren't so great. But it's been a wildly successful program. Well,
the regulations can sometimes be difficult to deal with, but if common sense is used and some practicalities inserted in there, then they can be highly successful. And I think that's what we're talking about, rather than just trying to follow a rule without understanding the basis of the rule was to ship quality fruit, and you've been
consistency, making sure that if you put the word Florida on it, that people knew that was the best quality you could buy and that it would be consistent quality. When you're a regulator, it is a really powerful job to be a regulator. But one of the things that we always tried to make sure that, and especially in my tenure, I've always said that we're here because our industry asks us to be here. And so, but at the same time, you have the responsibility to make sure there's a lot of difference between a shall and a may.
Well, you got to follow the rules, and if I'm following the rules, I want to make sure
Sure,
that you're following the
that's,
rules as
and that's
well.
what I always said. The rules are there for the 99% of the people that do it right every day.
Yeah.
So after my stint at the my first stint at the Department of Ag, I was very, very fortunate to be hired as the executive director for the Florida Citrus Processors Association. And that was an incredible time. That was a great, great job with incredible people. Now, you want to talk about a job interview? That interview, I think in the room, I won't be able to remember everyone in the room, but I had, there was Phil Herndon, Bill Becker, Hugh Thompson, Rick Tomlin. I'm talking about every head of every, if I didn't say Bob Bear or Steve Caruso I think it was Steve Caruso. And it was a pretty high-powered interview.
They wanted to make sure, huh? So you were the executive director of the Processors Association. Of course, then there were a number of processors. So you had a number of bosses that you worked for. That must have been a challenge.
Well, that was actually one of the interview questions, was if I had a president of the association that wanted me to do something that the board didn't have a position on, what would I do with that? And of course, you take it to your whole executive committee to do that. I mean, you just have to know what's the shall and what's the may, right? I think the most, my real service in that period of time was the Brazilians were in play, just new into our industry, and there was a lot of lack of uncertainty about what their role would be. And in the first month that I came to work, one of the large Brazilian processors said that they were going to withdraw from the association because they didn't want to report data. And at that time, the processors reported, they did all the reports for utilization and movement on processed in conjunction with the Department of Citrus and the Department of Ag. So I called Bob Crawford and Craig Meyer, Craig was a deputy commissioner and Bob was commissioner of Ag. I was actually in Tallahassee when I got the final word. It was during session, and I said, if this occurs, if they're allowed to pull out and not report, they will have the only complete data set in the world on citrus. And I believe it was Craig Meyer's idea. He said, why don't we memorialize in a memorandum of understanding that you are doing this for the agency, which we in fact were doing it for government, and they will either report or they won't have inspection. So Dan Santangelo was head of the Department of Citrus. He happened to be in Tallahassee at that time. And so in a matter of literally 12 hours, 24 hours, we'd written the memorandum of understanding. It had been executed by Crawford and Dan Santangelo, and I took it back to my board for affirmation to do so, which we did. And the Brazilian processors said, well, if that was the case, then they would stay in. And we ended up, during that period of time, we had the equalization tax case, and the Florida citrus processors supported the equalization tax, even though we had Brazilian members. And it was a really great time.
Yeah, not quite like it is now, but things have changed.
But we still have a great processed industry.
Oh, it's amazing to me that it's struggling. I talked earlier with Peter McClure and Jerry Newland, and we were commenting, and as I looked at my records, we grew twice as much fruit in Lake County in 1980 as the state grows now.
Well, when Alcoma became Citrus-Suco and they did that huge retrofit on that plant, I think they had the capacity to run 32 million boxes at that plant.
Yeah.
So, you could have one plant that could have the capability to run everything we produce right now.
Yeah, little old Golden Jim ran 15 million boxes a year.
Right.
Yeah. So, you've you've gone through government, you've gone through trade associations, you've gone through a processors association.
Well,
But you still aren't done yet.
No, I'm not. I left the processors at a time when I knew that we were contracting, and I had a great opportunity to work for one of our large land-owning families and help them get their assets put together, and that was a fantastic opportunity as well. That was wonderful. And I think that when you are in a position with people with really deep pockets and you get exposed to the level of talent that they bring in to conduct their business, it was like getting, my PhD in who really had it figured out. I mean, when you get to sit down with Harvard-educated economists that predict and to the year what the economic recovery is going to be, you get to sit in Lehman Brothers' private dining room. It was pretty fun stuff.
Yeah,
But
I can imagine.
Yes, but anyway, I did. That was wonderful. And then I went back. During that period of time, we were working on land entitlement and transportation. And I really do love transportation. I think that comes back from being in the scale house and having my family having a trucking company and understanding how all of that works. And I had an opportunity. The Speaker of the House asked me to come back and work with them on the restructuring of the Department of Community Affairs, who had a role but had far overreached their role. And so I was able to do that with Speaker Creedle and with Dean Cannon, and that was a fantastic period of time. And then out of that came one of my absolute favorite jobs, and that was working with a large company up in Lake County, the Gregg family, Family Dynamics, Peter and Gail Stremenos, and helping them get an exit off the turnpike at the hills of Mineola. And so they had it ended up being the single largest economic impact to Lake County other than the villages.
Oh, really?
Yes. It was a and we did it in an innovative way. We worked with the Department of Transportation, where it was a design build. We gave them 200 acres of grove. They built out and returned. It only took 99 acres to put the exit in, and it's a significantly important exit for Lake County. It's 22 miles from downtown Orlando.
Well, obviously, South Lake County has made some huge transformation. Everything has made a huge
That wasn't
transformation.
that long ago, which is really unimaginable.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, not being involved with it, all of a sudden there's now an exit you can get off there, so anyway.
Well, I told him I'd only do it if I could get to Jack's Barbecue.
And then Jack sold
And
out.
then Jack sold out.
I told Benny not to do that,
Yeah.
to hang around. I went to Jack's the last week that they were open, and you had to wait in line.
To buy barbecue sauce. I think we all did it.
Yeah, so it was end of an era. So how did you get enticed to get back into the Department of Ag?
Well, I think that we went through some transition with our Commissioner of Ag, and so there were a group of people that were interviewing the candidates for the division director in fruit and vegetable, and it's the thing about the division of fruit and vegetables, the work that you do, you are the place where you're converting growers' crops into real money, and it's really extraordinarily important. It is a time in motion, it's a perishable commodity, and then when you add citrus in there, citrus is so political, and they just didn't have anybody in those interviews that they felt like could fix it, do the job. And so it was a Friday afternoon at 5:01, and I had, those people will remain nameless, but I had 3 phone calls within 3 minutes. They came out and said, you got to come do this. And so it was just at a period of time where I needed to be close to my parents in their later years, and it was just the right, I love the industry, absolutely love it.
Obviously you do.
I do.
So you've had a rare opportunity to interact with some of the most dynamic and exciting people. Must, as you look back on it, it's got to be, you got to have so many memories of different folks that stick out in your mind. You know, stories about Bobby McCowan and so forth. I just, I'm always marveled at the number of people that we have. And you and I served on the Citrus Hall of Fame board for a while, and I started off as a kid there. I was, Henry Swanson was on there, and Henry retired, and he recommended me to take his place. They should have never done that. I was just a kid, but anyway, I got
Well,
the job.
maybe you were there meant to have the continuity between generations. I often feel like some of the things that I've been privileged to for having started so young is that there's stories to tell because we were just keen observers at that moment, right?
But yeah, it's overwhelmed. I can remember sitting in a room with Ben Hill Griffin Jr. and
Right.
Herb Mansfield and
No, but
Randy
we-
Sexton, and all,
Right.
you know, and now,
Right.
you know, those were the icons of the
Right.
industry.
Well, I was fortunate if I served on the Citrus Administrative Committee and was able to go on those trips with, you know, Randy Sexton Sr. I mean, I was just right at that sweet spot. I knew Ben Hill Griffin Jr. I knew Mr. Evans. I knew, oh gosh, I was trying, it's just amazing. Some of the, it was so, Art Matthias, I'll get it right. Art Matthias. Art, we don't even talk about Art, and Art did so much for everyone. It was just really an incredible time.
Yeah, well, there's some wonderful
George
stories.
Jenkins.
I
I
got-
knew George Jenkins.
I got
That's
to tell
crazy.
my favorite Lisa story, okay?
Oh, please, I'm afraid.
Now, you remember when the Citrus Hall of Fame was struggling, and we found out that didn't even own ourselves, that the
Oh, yes.
Florida Showcase owned the Florida Citrus Hall of Fame, and we went through this, and we needed Mutual to get on board and support
Cause.
our separation. So you said, let me go. I know the directors, I can do this. And I said, okay, we'll go. And I'm thinking, you know, this ought to be a slam dunk. They're going to support us, but I'm not really sure. And you said, let me make the presentation. I'll know they'll listen to me. You go in, you do a fantastic job. They vote to support us and everything else. And we're leaving, and you say, thank you. And I say, for what? She said, not for letting, she said, you said, thank you for letting me have my way. And I thought, how honest and upfront. She was so concerned and so determined and knew that she could do the job, but you were appreciative that I didn't exert my authority as president to say, no, I'm going to do the thing.
Well, I think that I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine
Them telling
that there
you
was
no?
I couldn't imagine that there was a group of people that didn't care enough about the Hall of Fame to relinquish the name and preserve what had been in place for so long. It was, you know, it was an injustice to the industry to not go forward. I still feel pretty strong about it.
Oh, it was just a matter of where you were trusting Showcase to do all this stuff, and then you find out that they got a secret agenda going on. But
Johnny Updike just told me a story about Phil Herndon telling him a story about me the first time that Johnny really knew who I was, and I had left Mutual and worked for the family and came back for the elections in May. I think we held them in June back then, but May or June, to be elected to Mutual's board. And it was very competitive back then. And so I knew that because I had been on the inside of Mutual, I knew that there were shalls and mays in the bylaws, right? You did not have to, on the slate, vote for all four candidates for Polk County. You could vote only for one. So I knew that if the people who I had lobbied for their vote voted for everyone, that I would be diluted in my vote. So I had my group of people, and they only voted for me. And Phil told Johnny that story, and he said, from then on, I knew we were good. And he was, like I said, Phil was just a great supporter.
Yeah, I went to a couple of mutual elections when somebody brought in a bunch of proxy votes.
Right.
And surprised everybody. The next year, I guarantee you, there was a big turnout. They weren't going to have a proxy vote.
Outvote anybody.
Yeah, outvote who they wanted to get into on Mutual's board. Well, the Hall of Fame is doing very well, though. We've come a long way. We're back obviously, at Southern, and they've been extremely supportive of us. The industry's been extremely supportive of us. And
I think we took it back to Florida Southern, or took it to Florida Southern during that time that you and I were on the board together. And that was super. They've just been, it's just the right home for it. Was also, from our family perspective, we were able to hold the 50th anniversary of the Hall of Fame at my parents' barn, at Leland Young's barn in Alturas, and that was always a highlight to me.
Now, where did he get into collecting and getting items? I mean, there's some people that don't want anything extra around, it's gone, but
well, Daddy's things were not what I would call thrown away. I think, first of all, he had an incredible eye for beauty. He could see things that other people couldn't see. He knew that the beauty of the wooden sizers in a packing house were beautiful. And I just tell you, we've at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, we've exhibited cast tractor seats. So he just knew what was beautiful, and he was extraordinarily talented, both from an engineering standpoint. The barn, he built that barn literally by himself with the assistance of a friend of ours, Jimmy C. And he drew it on a napkin, took it to a draftsman, and the draftsman wrote up the blueprints, got the permit for it, and he built it.
He was one of those unique people that could see things in 3 dimensions. I've run across a few. My son was a building contractor, and he could look at a blueprint and visualize it in 3 dimensions. If you move this wall over here, or you did this, and most people, it was just a flat piece of paper, but your dad could see.
Oh, he could do, and he was one of the charter members of the Florida Flywheelers Association, and so we have 3 Fairbanks Morris engines, flywheel engines, and we did that from early. I think the first meeting of that group was in the early 60s. Just incredible. I mean, he really did. I mean, preserving the end tags, the trailer plates. Who has those? You have the crate labels, but who has what was on the trailers?
I don't know, but I have a guy. I don't know if Harry Morrison, you know the name Harry Morrison? Harry Morrison, I think, worked for the Department of Ag. I don't know what his deal was, but Harry, during the 80s, when they were pushing out groves, he said, look at all these grove signs that are being piled up. And Harry has about 50 of the grove signs, and he's going to share them with me
I would love to see those.
To display. Barney Dillard, a Kraft grove sign, and all those, and we're going to do it. But Lisa, there's very few places where we can display these artifacts. Southern won't take any artifacts. They don't. Where are they going to put a sprayer?
Well, now you're going to get me on my salesmanship point. So Senator Albritton. So as you are aware, my father, Leland Young, passed away in April of this year, late March of this year. Right. Senator Albritton put money in the budget for the legislature for the barn to be preserved as the Leland Young Legacy Park. The barn at Leland Young Legacy Park. And the governor signed that budget, and we're working now with the county. The county is going to take some convincing, and I don't know that the county is the right place. I think that it may end up being the Department of Agriculture, but that, the barn was truly the heart and soul of our industry for so long. I mean, the Miss Florida Citrus barbecues there. And my parents never charged anyone for the use of the barn, and it was our business. So they would have to shut that barn down, clean it up, and be ready for work the next day. And they just had incredible generosity.
Well, we gotta keep that. We can't,
We really should
And-
figure it out. We
and-
really should figure it out.
And I'll get on my bandwagon. For years, agriculture said that we're not telling our story, we're not telling our story. And I tried to get the city of Claremont, to put a citrus barn at their historic village. I mean, Claremont was gem of the hills.
Well, I will tell you, so the way that this was presented to the legislature is the barn is a multi-use cultural center and venue, and it's actually the trailhead for the scenic cycling route, the scenic central cycling route, because, the diversity of what's been hosted there. I mean, we had 1,200, 1,700 cyclists at different events. I can't tell you how many events we've hosted since Daddy's passing in April and March. I get it, late March.
Wow. So we've got to preserve this stuff.
No, we do.
We have to, and so that's my mission now.
I had someone offer me a citrus ladder the other day. Said, "Would you want this?" I said, "You bet I want that."
I bet it's not as big as my ladder.
Well, you probably have a 30-foot ladder.
38.
Well, there you go.
It's displayed.
I have a barn you can hang that in.
You know where? I have 4 of them.
Wow.
And one of them is in the Lake County Administration Building, and it's a round building. And so
Oh,
it's,
yes.
so it's on the rotunda floor of the 2nd
I've
floor.
seen that.
And the ladder goes past the 5th floor balcony.
So back to Tom West being incredible to me.
Oh.
When, after the, Tom, in those freezes, and I can't remember if it was the 81, but I believe it was the 81 freeze, Tom West harvested every grower's fruit that he had a contract with before he harvested the first box of his own. And he was just an incredible guy.
He was. And so many, but there were a number of independent handlers whose reputation was, as you said, on the outside. But you knew if Tom West bought your crop, you were going to get paid for it, whether he picked it when you wanted it picked or not. But you were going to get a check, and the check wasn't going to bounce, and you didn't
That's
have
right.
to worry about anything.
He took me to a Hamlin block, and they were seedling trees, and it would have taken your 38-foot ladder to pick them. But the production, I can't even remember. It was some ungodly production number that were on those trees.
Well, and Tom's property now is a beautiful subdivision in Novita. It's been, you still have a whole lot to contribute. This is dynamic, one thing after another. And I know that here that you're going to make some really strong changes. I mean, how'd you ever get Peter McClure? What a find.
Yeah, right? So I know that, again, the gift that my father gave me was I do have a spatial mind. I have the ability to think spatially. And so the time and motion, I just have always been able to do more with less in people. And so I realized that when they were putting the craft program together, that I was listening to everyone talk about the contracts and how they were going to do this, and I'm like, there are people. I know this isn't hard. I've got the ag statistics people are in the field. I know that the production people are in the field. I know the fertilizer reps are in the field. There's got to be an easier way. And so I had worked with Tamara and with Matt Joyner at Mutual, talking about, I really felt like fruit and vegetable could do that field work because it would dovetail when we are in our off season. And we always are looking for work for those people because we don't pay those people when they don't work. And that's, so we try to round their season out with some work. So that was working really well. So Peter had moved from Fort Pierce to where his wife is from in Dade City. And we went to school together, went to college together. And I said, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And he said, I don't know. I said, I think I have something for you to do. So I brought him in to see if he wanted to work with us in our Food Safety Modernization Act and do audits in the field on produce safety. And it didn't take long for Peter to distinguish himself as a leader among a younger generation where people were coming to him. And then the craft program came on, and I said, you really need to do this portion. And Peter's pulled more leaf samples in his life than he can shake a stick at.
Well,
so it's so fortunate because he's such a great resource for everybody here.
Well, it's nice that people like that aren't just getting away. I can tell you that people like you and Peter McClure, you don't retire. Trust me, when that time comes, you'll be doing something else. You aren't going to be sitting back knitting.
I know it's a line in a movie, but one of my friends said, "You make coffee nervous."
Well, it's, as we said earlier, it's a dynamic industry, and I tell this story time and time again, but it's so true. As a county agent, you go do career days. I'm sure you've done career days. Mm-hmm. So I go and do a career day at Oak Park Middle School in Leesburg. And I usually, first question's, what's agriculture? And so the kids all come up with driving a tractor and so forth. So sixth period of the day, this young lady sits in the front, dressed like she could go work at the bank. Perfect, sat there, and I asked, what's agriculture? And she raised her hand, and the rest of the kids are back there like this, I call on her, and she never missed a beat. She said, it's a way of life. Now, she had been well coached or something, but it is, Lisa. It's been a way of life for you, and I'm sure glad I got into it because it's been a way of life for me. The people are just amazing. They're resilient. They surprise the heck out of you all the time.
All the time.
And it's just something that we can really,
Well, I am fortunate. I have a daughter, Leslie, and Leslie works in Congress, as does her husband. And I had her at the mutual board meeting in the director's office in a carrier on the floor. And you have to break them in young. And when I worked for the processors, it was after Hurricane Charlie. Jeb Bush was governor. And Leslie had actually met Governor Bush when she was much younger, so this was late in the last part of his term, and when George W. was president. And so he flew into Tampa, and we all, the trade association heads, went there and the commission to talk to him about getting the funding that was so desperately needed for the recovery after the hurricane. And so I told her, I said, I don't know if you're going to be allowed in the room. You're not. Bring a book. I just need you to sit tight and do what you do. So as we got there, and the agents that were with the governor, they let him in. She sat in the chair beside her, on the wall, and we're all at the table. And we're talking about asking Jeb doing the pitch, and in a minute he said, "Hey Leslie, what do you think we should do?" And I'm like, and she says,
have I trained her properly?
She said, "Governor, I think you should ask for the money." And we all just went, what she said. What she said. So it's, you bring them on early and keep them close, right?
Well, and it's a wonderful experience. And look at all we've gone through and what we're suffering through now with greening, but I think there's enough enthusiasm, there's enough creative minds out there that they're going to find a solution. I'm just glad that my term as a county agent is up, because I couldn't think of anything worse than going out, visiting a grower and telling him I know what's wrong, but I just don't have an answer for you.
I think especially in our family, I still have a grove. It's hard decision making for what you need to do and want to do with that. I think it was really hard on my father's generation that we see they're falling away now. It was the only thing that had happened to him in the industry that hard work wouldn't get him out of. And it was tough.
Oh, it's difficult, and I thought sure that we put enough money, we're going to find some researchers that are going to find an answer.
Well,
But
I think
it's not over with.
No,
yet,
it's
but-
not over yet. And I mean, you know, hope is everything, right?
Well, we're gonna hang in there. I'm telling the story, and they're working on finding a solution. And
Well, that's it. Sweat equity and hope will get us there.
and the new generation too, that they're creative, and now we're seeing families that are doing some direct marketing, and so they're making the form of venue, and they're encouraging people to come out. Heck, when the Blueberry Festival takes place at Claremont, they have to get the deputy sheriff out to control traffic to people to go out to the Hills Blueberry Farm to pick blueberries. And I'm sure there are places like this in Polk County
There are.
that folks are going to, and the families are looking at it and approaching it in an entirely different direction and being successful.
So one of the things I think about a lot is how did most of the people get here for the citrus industry? And you mentioned it earlier that the Piney Woods label, that he came from Macon, Georgia. Well, I would imagine it was probably boll weevil that shifted him out of that, or hardships, the economic hardship. And economics and pressure, whether it's development pressure or pest and disease pressure, is what makes you tougher, strengthens your industry, evolves your industry. And I think that we can, as Burt Roper said to me, we live through the happy days of citrus. But I think there's happy days out there. It won't be
It
a
won't be like it
nostalgic.
was
It won't
before.
be.
You know,
But
we're-
is there an opportunity? There is. Will it be as we envisioned it? It won't. I mean, will Florida be as we envisioned it? It won't. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity there for the people behind us to have an industry and
Oh,
and have hope.
Yeah, there's people who still, agriculture is still a way of life for them, and they're gonna figure a way to make it work. But we're gonna go forward.
We
Dear,
are.
thank you.
You too,
It's been
John.
a delight. Been a
Thanks
delight.
for letting me have my way.